Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, sublime, strange, and silly aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men often feel they have to hide, or at least not talk about their parenting role. One thing I know from personal experience is being a lead dad is not a traditional role for men, whether you work full-time, part-time, or devote all your time to your family. Parenting is so often left to mothers or paid caregivers. But here at the Company of Dads, our goal is to shake all that off and create a community for fathers who are lead dads, welcome other dads in who want to learn more from them, and of course, support working moms. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan, and today my guest is Sara Madera. She's a founder of Plan Creatively, which works with working moms to manage the demands of career and parenthood. This is something that has only gotten more difficult during the pandemic and now in what some people are calling the next normal. So it's super relevant that we're talking to Sara at the beginning of the year here. After working in Asia for years, she now lives in the New York area with her husband and two children, ages 6 and 8. Sara, welcome to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we're going to do something different with this podcast today. We're going to talk about I guess, in our respective worlds of working dads who are super involved with their kids and working moms trying to, make time for their career and their family. We're going to have our equivalent of the chicken or the egg. And that is, what comes first, gender equity at work or at home? So, Sara, what's your take on this? You go first.
So I know that there have been reports and studies by, I won't say men, but yes, by men, that they've interviewed women who have said that gender equity at home comes first. And that doesn't feel right to me. And it doesn't feel right to me or to my colleagues or to my clients that I speak to who are all working moms. And we feel that gender equity at work has already advanced and comes first before gender equity at home. Even though I am so grateful for you and the work that you're doing to expose, men to this model of being lead dads and men who are doing this and showing us all, I still think that gender equity at work comes first. What do you think, Paul? Well,
I'd say that, yeah. I mean, in my own life, I think probably my wife works in asset management, which is a male-dominated field. I think gender equity probably came a little more quickly at home because while I was at the New York Times, I sort of put my hand up to be, the lead dad. But one of the things we talk about at the Company of Dads that, the lead dad is that go-to parent, whether he works full-time, part-time, or devotes all of his time to his children. So I think part of it is, we see it, this is going to be a great answer, but we see it working in conjunction because if men are allowed to be, their full self at work, meaning being a real parent, not an event parent. Anybody can be an event parent these days. If your kid's graduating from something, you can leave early. A kid has a sporting event, you can leave early. That's not a bit, but being a real parent, that helps the man realize his potential at work. But it also, we hope, reduces some of the burden on working moms at work to feel like they have to be the go-to parent if a kid is sick, or they have to be a go-to parent in, the snowstorm. And ideally, we hope that is going to help management see that, guess what? You have a whole lot more working parents at your company than you thought, and they're all making this work, and they're making it work in the next normal. But I'd ask you, why do you, when you look at it, what are some of the markers that it has gone better, gender equality has gone better at work than at home?
Well, I think there are a few things, but like most recently, because of the pandemic, I feel like we are seeing lots of focus on women at work right now, right? In terms of the McKinsey studies, the Deloitte studies that are showcasing the needs of female workers, at the forefront, and that happened because of the She Session or the Great Breakup, whatever you want to call it, where women accounted for 55% of the jobs lost in just 1 month in 2020. So I think that really made companies sort of sit up and take notice, that when they were losing all of these women. And so they started talking about these things that I think were great for all parents, not just moms, but particularly, that this was focused on as women as caregivers. offering more of that paid leave, the work from home, the flexible work options, the higher wages to bring women back. I felt like women were willing to put their foot down and walk away because they couldn't quit their job as parents. So they tried to find, balance and, leave burnout where they could. But the workplace responded and said, we want to have you, and that they were problem solving mode to focus on how to make that work for them.
One of the things on the home front that we found is that, the company of dads is a diverse group. There are 25 million lead dads in America out of 125 million people. So I don't want to speak for all of them, but, many who had, knowledge worker jobs or white collar jobs that they were able to do at home, they may not have been as involved or as lead daddish before the pandemic, but there's something about it that made them think, hey, I don't want to go back to how it was before. I want to have more of a presence at home and be a full-time dad, not an event dad. And at least in our group, again, self-selecting, they opt in to be part of the company of dads. We don't have a draft board that recruits them. But that group has really opted in and leaned into this notion. And when we talk to their spouses, often their wives, they feel a benefit. But I'm hearing from you, at least at the top of this, that a lot of the women you're working with, a lot of the working moms, aren't finding that their partners or their husbands are helping out as much at home. And I guess I'd ask, if that is the case, what tips do you give to them to get their husbands to help out more, to become future candidates for the company of dads, become real lead dads?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a great question. So it's really interesting. I love when I speak with so many, women, whether again, colleagues or clients, so many of them tell me, oh, my husband is great. He does so much, and I'm so grateful for him that, that he does so much more than my dad did. But still, I am.
The bar is usually pretty low when I look at that generation, and you could give out little medals to say, like, I changed one diaper in my life. Oh yeah, I changed 0 diapers in my life. So that is really setting the bar low.
Yes, I would agree. But most of them are effusively, they're, my husband helps, my husband does this, my husband does that. But most of them, I think across the board, maybe all of them, are still exhausted. They're still overwhelmed. They're still really tired. They're still, carrying the mental load. And so they're still not feeling that, even while their husband is helping, again, doing more, they're still not feeling that things are equitable at home. And I do think a big part of that is the mental load, that even if their husband is helping, maybe he makes the meals, like at my house, but the wife is still the one who is doing the meal planning, or maybe the grocery shopping, or all of the sort of the mental piece of it. There's still that sort of execution piece that's, that their husband is helping with, but not that, not the sort of the bigger piece, the mental load. And of course, then I have a conversation with them, because sometimes they are having, they have mom guilt, right? When their husband is doing the dishes and they have their feet up, and then they're like, oh, I should be helping. So that's a different conversation. Yeah. But for sure, always the conversation, we start with kind of, what are their values? What is important to them? Is it important to them that the kids, have a meal? Is it important that meal is healthy? Is it just, or is it really important that they have family time and just that they're eating together, right? And what is important to them? And almost across the board, which is great. I love, and I'm so happy to hear this, that, between in their relationship values, that, communication and honesty is important. So then I really, use that to sort of.
What kind of marriage is that, with communication and honesty?
The best kind. And then so we'd use that as a way to start the conversation. You say that this is important to you. This is important in your relationship. How can you talk about the needs that you have, in terms of, what else you need at home? Is he able to provide that? Do you need to outsource it? How can these needs be met? And that's one thing that we always talk about too, is like, I think men are really good at this. Men are really good about speaking about what they need or what they want and making it happen. And I think that women aren't we're not, I don't know if it's conditioned or what, but I think it's harder. It's harder for a lot of women. And so I think that's great when they work with me, that we're able to find what it is that they want or they need, and able to express it better. It kind of comes out from under those layers of, well, my kids need this, or my job needs this, or my husband needs this. And we can get to what they want and what they need, so that they're able to communicate that to their husband, and then start this conversation of, how do we make things more equitable at home?
One of the things we do is a simple exercise when we work with couples is, and when you and I met at a conference a couple months ago, this is something I said, simple exercise of taking out a piece of paper, husband, wife, each writing down the things that they do, the unpaid stuff, the stuff around the house, the things that they do, and then the things that they think their partner does, and they both do it, and then they compare, and you see, and of course the lists are never the same, and each person thinks that they actually do more than they do. But the point of this is to get a conversation going, communication being key. Obviously, I was joking. Make life communicating, so that's important. But the other part is, I think, to sort of address, because there's a crucial. There's one thing feeling overwhelmed. There's one thing carrying too much of the mental load. But if you're not careful in a relationship, it can tip into resentment. And as I say, resentment doesn't start when you get married. Resentment does, or hopefully not, or when you first have your first child, your second child, and you get your promotion at work. Resentment is sort of like the dust under the couch. Like, it just accumulates there unless you're really vigilant and you're looking, you're like, wow, that's a lot of dust. Let me clear that out. Otherwise, it just is there. And then you go and you move 10 years later. And you're like, wow, look at all this dust here. How do you, and so we do this simple paper exercise to get people to think this through, because we don't want people to get to the resentment phase. And this also works for us in the workplace, because you can also, do the same exercise with employees and managers, slightly different guidance. But when you think of, techniques that you use to help your clients, not just say, what they want as, working moms, but how they're gonna accomplish that with their husband or partner. What are some of the things you do to help them translate, what they want into what that family system can actually achieve or sustain?
Yeah, I love that you did the list, because that's actually something that I use as well, because I do think there's a lot of those invisible tasks that both sides do that the other is not aware of, right? Especially like paying bills, whoever's doing that. It used to be, maybe you sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a check. And so it was very visual and it was very physical. And now it's, they probably do it on their computer or on their phone. And it's, it's kind of invisible in that way.
Wait.
So it's not being noted.
Keep talking, Sarah. I'm just going to pay this credit card bill while we're on the phone, but I'm listening.
Exactly. So like, I think having that list is is really clear. My husband takes out the trash, and do I always thank him for it? No, I don't.
Well, why should you? This is the question. Why should you thank him for doing something that somebody has to do? Like, I don't think like anything that's not above and beyond. If it's like, men getting thanked for taking the kids for the afternoon. Why should they be thanked? Because they're a parent as well. And I think a lot about, I'm the one in my house that carries more of the mental load, but I certainly don't carry all of it. We sort of divided up the mental load. As my wife said, I'm better at logistics, and she handles a lot of the other stuff, and it works. But, do I thank her, when she buys the Christmas presents for our kids? Maybe, but does she, maybe not. I mean, does she thank me when I organize the schedules for everything for the kids? Maybe not, but I don't really care, because we've divided it up, and it's not like, okay, I'm doing this and I need praise. We both have had a lot of conversations about this. I mean, we're 13 years into the parenting journey and 18 years into the relationship. And that helps us, but I know that we're also not, normal. So if people haven't had those conversations and they're still thanking each other for things that somebody has to do until your kids are old enough to do it for you, I mean, then that's the ideal. Like, we keep boss your kids around. But that takes a while. I can't tell my 5-year-old to carry the trash out,
Well, for us, that's something that's really important to us. Like, we, that's how we kind of keep the dust from getting, gathering up under the sofa, is to have that gratitude, for each other for those small tasks, and I say he's really great about thanking me for doing the laundry. That's something that I do. And, so he makes, like, every week, he's like, thank you so much for doing the laundry. I appreciate it, and I'm actually, that is one of my goals for this year, is to do the same back to him, to show that gratitude, so that we don't kind of let those things, that dust build up. And that's how we work together.
What's your husband's name? What's your husband's first name?
Christian.
Christian, I have never seen anybody take out the garbage like you. The je ne sais quoi as you throw it into the trash. It's just fantastic.
It's great. I'm gonna record that. I'm gonna try that one. See, he'll probably look at me strangely. But, even as much as he does that, there are times he does make fun of me because he's just like, I just don't know that men will ever worry as much as women do. And I'm like, well, that worrying is what makes sure that the kids have underwear and, winter clothes. And, that worrying is what, kind of keeps us, our family together. So, yes, like we are thankful and we are grateful for each other, but we also, tease each other a little bit, within our rights as well, for these things that, honestly, they might, he's not going to become the worrier, and like that's not going to help move our family forward, but I will, and it will, so it just takes a little bit of give and take, both serious and not serious, to keep us in our happy place.
When I'm away and my wife is running the monkey show that is our family, I have no concerns whatsoever. I don't, obviously I call home and check in, but I don't have any concerns. And if the kids watch 14 hours of TV and eat Fruit Loops all day, I'm like, well, we all make decisions, which would never happen if my wife's listening. She would never do that. But I'm just saying I'm able to sort of, shut it off. And I have a question, throw it out there. A lot of the, men I've talked to, they worry about, what's called, maternal gatekeeping, which is a really jargony term that another person I had on the podcast, Kate Mangino, who wrote a book called Equal Partners, talks about. And that is the idea of, letting go, like trusting that whichever side, either the husband or the wife, or the wife or the husband, whatever, has it. And like you're both in there as parents, and nobody is sort of, fulfilling or completing a task. They're parenting in the way that they see fit, and your child is safe, healthy, all that. You've not married a sociopath, so it's going to work out fine. What do you see that as a place that people have to get to, accepting that two different strategies can be equally good, or are we there after the pandemic and we've realized what, this is a battle we don't need to fight?
I think that changes with the age of the kids. I mean, in my experience, that's what I saw. Like when the kids were infants and they were with me a lot more of the time because of, breastfeeding and just, the time that I spent with them during that, I felt like there was a lot more of that kind of maternal gatekeeping. And I was just like, oh, don't burp them like that. Don't hold them like that. Even I saw it in myself, and that, just really because of the time I spent with them, I felt more of an expert, I guess, with them. But now that they're getting older and, I see that my husband brings something different to the relationship. Right. And so it becomes a lot more of a conversation for exactly that reason. And that, that I'm not as likely to take the lead, he's so great at answering my kids' 50 questions about, what happened to the Titanic, or, whatever the question may be. And where I'm like, oh, I probably would have lost
They have mind. Questions after the first one. I mean, it sunk. I mean, what else do they need to know? Like,
oh my gosh, my son wants to know what they ate, what kind of plates they had. He wants to know all of it. And, I would have lost my mind 40 questions before that. And he's just happy to continue on, and I'm just like, wow, I see like how great that is and the value that he brings. And so it has, as they've gotten older and, I'm able to see a lot more of that. He spends his, equal amount of time with them, that it becomes more of that conversation. And it's really beautiful.
I don't want to put you on the spot to name the companies you work for. You're welcome to, but before starting your consultancy, you did work for some pretty big companies. Obviously, mostly pre-pandemic. When you think about your working life for some big companies as a working mom, and how it went, versus you, because you said at the top that gender equality is coming quicker to the workplace. When you see, what has happened in the past, 2.5 years in corporate America to the women that you're working with, what are the biggest differences that show you that, or show us that, gender equality is really coming to the workplace pretty quickly?
I think it's about a lot of the conversations that we're having, in terms of that flexibility and the work from home, the parental leave. I'm just seeing that so much more. I mean, I am new back to the US, so I probably don't have as many direct experiences with that. When I was overseas, for sure, the relationship to working parents, particularly working mothers, was really different than the conversations that I'm having, in the US, which is great. It's one of the wonderful things about the US, that I think that people are having these conversations. despite us being behind on a lot of other things in terms of paid leave for new parents. But other than that, the conversations in terms of the directions that we're going is definitely positive, which is fantastic. And I think that in terms of just even the transparency that we're able to have now in terms of, yes, like you say, being an event parent, I'm going to graduation, I'm going to the soccer game, and just being able to say that, that's a huge change, I think, and a great sign that we're moving in the right direction, that people can really be their whole selves and can show mom or dad that they are a parent and that they are able to do an awesome job at work and do an awesome job at home.
So before I ask you the last question, I'm going to ask myself the question, which is, I'm going to have you talk about the work front. And I would say, like, on the home front, if you're finding that there is a lack of equality between the working dad and the working mom, I go back to what I said earlier, and that you need to sort of make a list, sit down, prioritize, and discuss honestly, not at a point of, frustration where you just had an argument, but on a, random Saturday afternoon when everything's quiet, and really work it out, because these problems don't age well. And if they go into resentment, you're doomed. And that's, happy to talk more to anyone who wants to reach out, but that's the simplest solution as sort of a starter solution from the company of dads. If I put that question to you, and what you're doing in the workplace, if somebody feels like she's in a role or at a company where that move to gender equality is going more slowly or too slowly, what are some of the things that she could do to help move that process along, or at least, advocate, for herself?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. I think that one is talking, if they have a good relationship with their boss, is talking to their boss about it. And I think that this is one of the reasons that gender equity at work is coming along faster, is that when they have that conversation with their boss often will go into problem solving mode. Okay, I hear you. What can make this better? How can we solve this? What would resolve this? Do you need more time off? Do you need, what is it that you need? And start having a conversation, whether that's with, between the two of them or with HR or whoever they need to bring in to have the resources in order to respond to, to the situation, at hand. Hopefully if they have a good relationship with their boss, they can have that conversation more directly. If they go to HRs, obviously can still happen. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated, but there are resources and people there who can start talking in a problem solving manner. I think that where this gets complicated is when you do try to have this conversation at home, and that the response isn't necessarily as problem solving oriented, that it becomes a little bit more sensitive, where the husband says, "Oh, you're attacking me, I'm a failure," and that it's not as problem solving oriented, which makes it a lot harder and more sensitive, and a lot more delicate to maneuver. But hopefully at work it is a little bit more straightforward, and they're able to at least start having the conversations. Probably the solution won't be won't happen tomorrow, but at least the conversation and the solutions can start to be found, which I think, again, starts to move you in a positive direction. Or if it doesn't, it also gives you information, and you can start to look at companies that do offer the solutions that you need.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about, all the time. Some of the work we do at companies is that your top 20% have so many options. And so if you don't get this right, they're going to leave. Your bottom 30%, they're not going anywhere because nobody really wants them, and you may not even want them. But, what you do for those top workers will hopefully, trickle down throughout the workforce.
Yeah, agreed.
Sara Madera, founder of Plan Creatively. Thanks so much for joining me on the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do at the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer, Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media, Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition, Emily Servin, who is our web maestro, and of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.